Okay, welcome back. Let's talk about some guitars. So the first thing is that I do process each guitar quite differently, and I process the cleans differently to the distortions as well. So with that in mind, I've got my buses here, and generally what I will have is I'll have a clean for each guitarist, and I'll have a dirty for each guitarist. And then if there's any kind of solos or tremolo lines or sort of more lead parts, I'll usually have a solo bus per guitarist as well. And then sometimes I'll have like a general guitar reverb. I have it in this song. It's not on right now. Let's turn that on. And then yeah, that's a send effect from just the cleans, so I don't use that on the dirty guitars. Let's talk about the cleans during the intro, and let's talk about my cleans. I use quite a lot of microphones on my guitars, but in the end, I think we had about 7 microphones because we were just being greedy. In the end, though, I deleted most of them, and we just settled for the 57 angled at the cap and the 57 straight at the cap. But for this particular section of the song, I've actually got loads of takes. These are different performances, and they're kind of panned accordingly. So I've got one straight up the middle, and then the others are hard panned. The effects, I do have this guitar reverb here, but it's all baked into the audio. So there is actually a reverb pedal that I had turned on when I recorded. You can see at that point there's a bit more of a lift. What I did was I turned up the volume of the amp for this last cycle, because in the song that's where everything else also lifts up at this point here. That's where the kick drum comes in as well. So I wanted the guitar to reflect that. So if there's one thing I'm trying to get at here really is when you're in the studio, don't, at least to my mind, don't set up your amp and then just leave it. Your amp is as much an instrument as your guitar is. And you can impart a lot of personality into your recordings just by tweaking the amp before you play the part. So this stuff here is cleaner than this stuff here, and that is something that you notice in the track. As well as that, I also have this additional wet intro. If I go right back to the start and I just play you a little bit of that. Doesn't even sound like a guitar, really. So the first thing that I'm doing here is I'm automating just the level of that sound, because I don't want it to absolutely swamp my mix. But at the same time, I've got this bus here, Drew Wet Intro, which has a whole bunch of effects on it. If I turn these off, that is pretty wet sounding. That's 2 Boss pedals, a Boss reverb set to modulate, and all the mixes are really high. but when it came to mixing, there was too much kind of guitar character to it, so I mushed it up. So you've got the Sound Toys Crystallizer, which I guess is similar to the Eventide Crystals sound. After that, I've got the T-Rax Inverse Reverb. And that's kind of, that's like an on-the-fly reverse sort of reverse reverb kind of sound. Followed by some EQ where I'm killing all of the lows. Because when you start adding these sort of effects, it can get really muddy very fast. So if I add that back. Followed by Echo Boy. Good old Echo Boy. Which, again, I'm a massive fan of. Just some studio tape. I'm not using any saturation on this one. Normally I would crank that up quite a bit because I just like the sound of it, but it felt pretty good just leaving it off. This part is not really meant to be the focus, but you do hear it and you do miss it when it's gone. If I just play you this section again without that, wait for the tails to die. Just bog standard guitar at this point. But if we bring that sound back, it starts to fill in those gaps, and it adds some interest and personality to the introduction of the song. Because remember, this is just one guitar and some cymbal swells at this point. It would have been quite boring to leave it dry, I think. And then, of course, when everything else comes in, at this point, I bring the level down quite a bit, and then I start to sort of oscillate it down up until about bar 57. And at that point, Adam's guitar comes in, his clean part, which, again, 57 straight on, 57 angled, pointed at the cap. Nothing really that complex about the microphone positioning. He's using his Line 6 DL4 pedal on the swell setting to just sort of smear his notes a little bit. And originally, when this song didn't have vocals back in the day, this was kind of like the lead part, but when the vocals got written, this kind of became a counter melody more than anything. You do hear it in the mix, and you do miss it if it's not there. So again, I'm just making the point that it's all about layers of sound. If I mute the vocals, then it kind of starts to be the focal melody. And then when the gap occurs, I switch to like a semi-distorted sound. Well, some people would probably disagree with me and would probably say it's really distorted, but to me it's kind of halfway there. And you can hear that for this particular bit, that arpeggiated chord is double tracked and hard panned, so you hear it in the left and the right speaker. But as soon as it goes heavy, I just drop over purely to the left at that point. And that's obviously because Adam also comes in and he is on the right. So if you play those two together, you get quite a nice thick spread, and you can actually hear how different our tones are. So I quite like that effect. In terms of EQ, find Drew Dirty. If I take it all off, that's the raw sound of my amp. So the first one is Pro EQ. I'm basically just dealing with the extreme lows, the extreme highs. I'm subduing some of these resonances from my cab. You're not really hearing it so much in this part, but whenever I play a palm mute, this area goes absolutely nuts. So it's good to calm that down a little bit, especially when you're trying to make the bass guitar sit with all this stuff. The next one is more of a general tone, sort of a carving. It's making it a little bit more brighter. I'm scooping my mids a fair amount. I like to have some of that fizz. I like to have some of the clarity that you get from adding those high frequencies. Then I've got the T-Rax Neve 73 EQ. This isn't really doing that much. I'm taking out a little bit of the low mids, but I'm mainly using it to drive the mic transformer because you get a nice little bit of extra distortion from it. Preamp saturation, really, is what I'm using it for. And to my ears, there are loads of Neve 73 plugins out there, but I really like this particular one. It's the only one that really drives in this way. And the approach for Adam's guitar, that's his original, what we got from the amp. Similar sort of thing with the first EQ. I'm just controlling resonances and the extremes. You can see that's mine and that's Adam's. That comes from the difference of the cabs. He's got a Marshall JCM 800 cab, and I think the dimensions are slightly different to mine, which means that the resonances are fairly different as well. So you can hear that clears it up somewhat. And again, general tone shaping with the next EQ. So you can see with mine, I'm scooping a lot of 500 down to 200 even. With Adam's, I'm doing the same, but I'm doing it in reverse almost. So the tones are very different. And again, a little bit of mids, controlling them, but mostly microphone saturation, preamp saturation. And that's a Dunlop wah pedal doing that sort of filtery effect. I should say as well that with Adam's guitar, you can see that there are 4 tracks. So he's double tracked, but both takes are still coming out of the right side of the speaker, whereas with mine, I did double track, but you can see that this other track is actually muted because I didn't really feel I didn't feel that I needed it when it came down to mixing the thing. You can see later on it's not muted here, and if I remember rightly, that is where it goes heavy. So on my guitar, I'm getting quite a nice lift from having that extra track. You can hear with the processing, it cuts through the mix quite nicely and there's a lot more clarity than without those effects. Certainly on those kind of riffs, you could probably get away with not doing that sort of stuff on cleans. Like with the clean guitars, I think my processing is fairly minimal. There's not. I mean, I'm just basically controlling the lows on the cleans, and there's virtual mix bus to kind of give it a bit of console saturation, but only slight amounts. Let's jump to the middle of the song. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like, don't be afraid to experiment in the studio. Before we recorded this, all of this kind of pick scrapey type stuff didn't really exist. I was just holding the chord, and in the studio, I just I experimented and came up with some interesting sounds, as did Adam. I don't know. I kind of like that sort of stuff. I like things to echo off and naturally decay away rather than just a hard cut. Sometimes a hard cut is good. Just depends on the part. Let's talk about these cleans. Again, a lot of processing baked right into the audio. I just decided on the day how much of the effects that I wanted. It's a bit risky, but if you know what you want, and you know kind of what the end product should be, I suppose, you can make that determination as you record. I sometimes find that if you make those decisions throughout the recording process, when you come down to mixing, it makes things easier because you don't have lots of freedom, and that necessarily speeds things up. See, Adam's doing a very kind of subdued part. He's allowing for my solo, which comes in at bar 126, to kind of dominate. This is one of those points where a hard cut was absolutely necessary. That was absolutely necessary to make the part work. If you add that and the main dirty tracks together. And in the song, that's actually my favourite moment in this song, I think. It has real power to it. If I scroll down here and you look at the Master Dynamics fader, you can see for this whole section, I've brought the entire level of the track down. And at this point, I bump it up. And that's how you get those big kind of big bursts, big rushes. Without that rise, that change kind of feels a little flat, certainly when we recorded it. And we wanted it to basically echo what it's like when we play this song live, because we always have our distortions slightly louder than our clean channels, so that we can kick into a heavy section and have that impact. Let's talk about the outro guitars, and then I think there isn't really that much else to say. Just a basic EBO part, really, but it felt like it needed something like that. And again, I'm baking all of the effects into this stuff. It's not running in the mix. I mean, there's a little bit of reverb, but it's very subtle. And a lot of it's about performance. You know, the way that I ramp up that chord at the end. You can even see in the track, you know, the level of dynamics. Whereas if you compare that to the distorted stuff, you don't get that much dynamics. So typically you wouldn't really need to compress the distorted guitars, but you might compress the cleans if they were a little too spiky. I didn't really do any compression on the cleans. I don't think. Let's have a look. What's Virtual Mix Rack doing? No, it's just a mix bus. I solved that with positioning the microphone and with the level of the amplifier and the way that I played and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's mainly about creating like a tapestry of sounds. You want one guitar to sort of deal with the lows, and you want another guitar to deal with the highs. And then if you've got a lead part, you want the other guitar to be fully double tracked across the stereo field. And that's generally how I approach these sort of things anyway. Other than this point, where actually I decided I'd leave my guitar hard panned and I'd leave Adam's guitar hard panned. Again, this is a really kind of washy, atmospheric part that Adam's playing. So all of the delays and reverbs are hitting the front of his amp, so that you get just kind of like carnage, really. And the processing is just basically the same as the others. The EQ, the preamp, saturation. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of compression on that one. And the mix bus. That's Adam just kind of like scraping his strings and generally making a mess. But all of it together, it does work. And these riffs, they're pretty basic riffs. They're not complicated. But it's totally about the layers of sound rather than the layers of parts. There aren't too many mad harmonies. There aren't too many layers of guitars that would be impossible to play live. It's all about managing your lows, your mids, and your highs. So you do that with compression, you do that with EQ, you do it with different microphones. Like we've got the angled SM57 versus the straight on SM57. They both sound very different. Like if I play you, say, this angled, and then that compared to the straight, you can hear that the straight is a lot brighter and harsher sounding than the angled. And when you combine them, you get some good things. And you can see that they're not EQ'd at all, other than when they get buzzed together over here on the dirty channel. If it sounds bad with the microphone in front of the cab, you need to move the microphone. There's no two ways about it, really. You can't fix it later on with EQ. EQ is really meant to, in my opinion anyway, is really meant to help you find the core sound within a recording and to kind of emphasize it and to de-emphasize the bad parts or the areas where you want another instrument to take over. You know, you can't really use it to fix a bad recording. That might sound controversial. I don't think it is. I think most people would agree with me. I mean, this is a perfect example of the chief difference between my sound and Adam's sound. I have this more kind of metally, I suppose. It like almost like a 5150 PV kind of sound. I mean, it's not. It's a VHT, but kind of high gain American sound. Whereas Adam goes for more of a sludgy, darker tone. Yeah, so I think they complement each other quite well. So yeah, if there's anything about guitars that I haven't covered that you would like to see or you would like me to expand upon, leave a comment, send me a message, all the usual channels, and I will get back to you. See you in the next video for some vocals.